Hey everybody, thank you for being here. I hope what we share today is impactful to everybody in this room. It's a unique perspective, and it's one I'm going to share. It's going to be a little bit of an emotional roller coaster, so bear with me. I'll start it off. Hi, I'm Mike Ortoll. That is one of the most beautiful moments in my life. I was married almost 5 years ago, and that was the father-daughter dance. And my daughter was telling me I could move on. She says, "Dad, I know I'm always going to be your little girl," and that was the most spectacular, amazing moment in my life, the most moving moment in my life. And now you know why I'm doing this. I'm a father who's endured the most horrific loss a parent can have, and that's losing a child. Wish y'all could have met my daughter. She was an amazing human being. She was beautiful, inside and out. She was an amazing soccer player, sparky and competitive, and gave it all and left it on the field. And she had this electric smile, the most wonderful smile that anybody would want to ever see. And I wish I'd known what was going on in the inside. You would never have known. But she fell victim to this metaphor we're using for this disease, which is the monster of addiction. Christine did achieve sobriety for 3 years. She went the abstinence route, and it was amazing. She found her purpose. She was in service. Our family was so happy. It is amazing when a child finds their passion, which happens to be an area they're having a problem with. It was amazing 3 years of my life, of our lives. I have a unique, we battle this disease alongside our daughter for 10 years. 10 years, and to give you some perspective, probably about 40% of that time she spent in residential and in sober living. I have a unique perspective. I had the means to take care of my daughter, and the spend was untenable for most families. It was over 7 figures. Let me share my unique journey with my daughter. We went to over 20 residential facilities and over 30 sober living homes. We saw over 20 psychiatrists alone in those facilities, another 20 if you add those outside the facilities. And at times she was probably up to 30 prescriptions in general. We tried it all. We tried 12-step, AA recovery, we tried MAT, we tried DBT, CBT, motivational. My daughter had the means, and we tried everything. You know the stats. This is the leading cause of death of 18 to 45-year-olds in the U.S. This one really killed me. This disease touches 1 in 2 people. 23 million people suffering from a substance use disorder, and they touch 7 to 8 people. And that number is just climbing. It means 1 in 2 Americans wake up every day and they're dealing with this disease in their own home. As Ellen said, we are in the middle of the worst opioid epidemic ever, and we have really not figured this out. The reason I'm here, it's about saving lives. I think I've had enough. I think a lot of us here have had enough. This is about saving lives. Christine left a gift and somewhat a curse. She left over 50 assignments and journals. There were projects, there were assignments. I'll give you an idea of what they look like. There were letters to Dad, wonderful letters to Dad, and tough letters to Dad. They were letters to my disease, which were powerful. Hearing her write to her disease, what it was doing to her, how it seemed she had no control, and the disease writing back to her how that was so, how it was her best friend, and how she could control her. The higher power prayer letters were immense. Trying to search for God, trying to see if He would forgive her. The disease writing back, you don't deserve God, I've got you. The inner child work was tremendous. And then she watched a couple of her best friends overdose the last year of her life. And the trauma with that, if you have a friend who you begin using with and you lose them, is extremely traumatic. The most meaningful journal that I found was a tough one. My ex-wife, her mom, gave it to me about a year in when I was struggling to get this charity off the ground, and it was a eulogy from Dad. And in her recovery center in Tampa, Turning Point, their director is on our board of directors, and she's on the board of the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers. They make them write a eulogy project, and it was a 12-page project. She said, my dad's going to write my eulogy. And on that last page, she said, I do not want to be defined by my disease, but I want to be remembered for making a difference. And I want to give hope by that. And I'm going to make a cause of it. I wasn't ready to make a cause at that point, but my daughter's legacy has become my purpose. I had to move from loss to meaning, and along the way there was a lot of help. One of the great gifts was doing what I do best, is a lot of research and diving into problems. Was looking at a work that Dr. Shefali did on YouTube. I don't know if you've ever seen her on Soul Sunding, The Awakened Family, The Conscious Parent. But it was a beautiful YouTube, 3 minutes. Every parent who loses a child should watch this. And it basically says what we know as a parent who lost a child, it is the most enormous, most traumatic pain that a parent could have. But if we could take that immeasurable love that we have for that child and transform it to get out of pain to that love that we have with that child, we can move from loss to service. And it took time, but that's where I am right now, in a place where I could serve again, where I could use that energy of love that I have my daughter, still grieving, but not stay in that horrible place of pain. Our mission is to transform the life of those who suffer from substance use disorder and hope that they can seek recovery. We want to inspire that so they can thrive. Plain and simple. The first thing we did is we wanted to share her story. If you didn't get a chance to see it last night, who saw it, by the way? Joe saw it. It is a gift of vulnerability to me. We left nothing on the field. We told the story from the perspective of my daughter, her journals, her loved ones, and the experts, some of the best experts in this industry. On the abstinence side, and one of the best addiction psychiatrists in the country on the MAT side as well. As I said before, our hope is the lessons that we share are impactful for people wanting to seek recovery, and not just those in recovery, but their families, because we were also 1 second at a time. And maybe worse, they were medicating, and we probably wish we had been too. I'm a businessman. I advise large companies. I turn around large companies and save them. And the humbling thing here was I could not save my own daughter. I knew I wasn't God, but we had the means, and she tried everything, and we couldn't save her. So I had to dig deeper. What happened? One of the most frustrating things was data. When I got started on this journey with my daughter back in 2010 and 11, there was very little data. Or at least in Tampa Bay, every time I wanted to ask somebody about MAT, I was knocked down. And at that point, we knew it was probably OUD. So, and there's no data from the abstinence community. I mean, there's some studies, but what's the relapse rate? What's the success rate? It's very frustrating for a dad who's trying to help a daughter and a family who's trying to help a child. These are the things that I wish I'd known. I wish I'd known how bad the divorce had affected my daughter. It was a 3-year fight legally, and it started when she was 4 years old. I had no idea about what childhood trauma was, even though I had lived it myself. My dad was a political prisoner of war, and my grandfather put him in prison in Cuba. So for me, in a way, and it's in my daughter's journals, this is now healing me from my trauma. And it's been an unbelievable journey in learning about trauma and wanting to learn more so I could help people. I saw all the stigma this disease bears within my daughter, within society, within her 12-step community, within the family. Stigma that we should not see, but stigma that's still there. I wish I'd known all the despair she was going through, and I think she was keeping it from us to keep us safe. I think we all know now, but I wish I'd known then how easy it was to buy drugs online. It takes an average of 3 minutes to get on WhatsApp, to get a TikTok or Instagram, to get a different menu every day, to choose what you want, to consummate the deal, and then it's delivered at your doorstep. I know parents know it here, but I hope they know it here. And they do all the things that we can do, personally as a parent and also as a society. I wish I had known my daughter's DSM score. It wasn't just severe, it was an 11 out of 11. I wish I had known the insanity of this family disease. Man, it's insane. The people that are supposed to be the most supportive a lot of times contribute to the health our children have. I wish I had known it was not just a disease of the brain. I learned quickly it wasn't a moral choice. I learned quickly it was a brain disease. But I felt it was a symptom or something that happens the earlier you use, the more you use, the intensity of the use. But as I felt I was missing something. And then I came upon Rat Park and some other books.
What causes drug addiction? To find out, researchers in the 70s investigated rats in empty cages with normal and drug water. Because all their rats chose the drug water, became addicted, and died of malnutrition, they concluded that drugs are uncontrollable and that a global war on drugs was necessary. But another scientist thought it was obvious that lonely rats in boring cages would choose drugs over water. So he put them in a lush cage called Rat Park with friends and everything a rat could want. His rats chose not to use drugs. He even used addicted rats from the lonely cages, who gradually reduced to become drug-free at Rat Park. That's like many humans who get strong drugs in hospitals and just stop when they go home to a loving family. While alone and unhappy, street users turn into desperate addicts. These experiments show that chemical addiction is not the only thing that matters in drug abuse, and that a person's access to a lush cage is even more important than making drugs unavailable and criminalizing its users.
The lesson I learned here was tough. I learned a lot of it too late. At her funeral, I learned from her therapist, who I was really close to, your daughter lost her connection, which I kind of already knew because she lost it in her MAT group. I mean, in her old recovery group, because she had chosen the MAT route. She had lost it with some of her friends, she had lost it with some of her family, and she was extremely re-traumatized with the disease, where she really lost it with society. I love this place. It's a roller coaster ride. Stay with me. I love this place. It was a natural place for me to start. I really didn't need to take some baby steps first, and this was a nice place for me. It's a place where I went to college, where I still have some of my best relationships, and it was an easy thing to come back. My daughter wanted to go to FSU like Dad. Some of my best friends, some fraternity brothers came to me, and 4 of us funded a movie, actually a documentary film, called the Bobby Bowden Dynasty Film, a story of faith, family, and football, which was about Coach Bowden, who really built this university, helped build it, and the town and the community. I love giving back, not just money, but with my time. I'm in the risk management insurance business, and I love coming up here and mentoring the students in our business school, as well as recruiting them. Then, because of Christine's disease, FSU reached out to me in the last year of her life and said, "Hey, Mike, we need help. We need help with our LIFT college recovery program." And I said, "I'll be back. My focus is elsewhere." And it happened. Unfortunately, I lost my daughter. It took a couple months to walk again. And my first thing that I could do to keep walking was help build one. What is a college recovery program? A CRP is a supportive environment where we can help students in recovery thrive. It's a community where they can feel safe and they can work on the recovery together. We have some amazing people here. I shouldn't do this, but those 3 people against the wall are amazing. Chelsea Shore and Liam Horn have been amazing in building this. And the faculty's been amazing, and the support has been amazing. Why is it important? Well, the numbers are staggering. When I first asked the school, what's the problem? They would say, hey, Mike, only 5% of the students in the school identify as being in recovery. And I'm like, well, what student wants to tell their school that they're applying for that they need to be in recovery? So I set out to find out what the real number was. That was staggering. 24% of all students in college meet the medical definition of substance use disorder per CASA, Columbia's last study. 24%. And worse than that, less than 5%. It's actually less than 3%. Last year, there was about 164 schools that had a college recovery program. It's down to 151. And we got a worse crisis. Most of the schools that have one don't have a good one. I had to make the submission. My first call to action became building a college recovery program at every university in this country. But I needed to start somewhere, and guess where I started? Ours here was a little bit like most of them. It was running It needed a lot of help. It needed support, not just financial support. It needed an alumni who was really going to be active, and I was blessed. We changed that. I want to tell you that working with the faculty, with the grad students, with the interns, and with those students in recovery has been an amazing gift of God for me. I go to meetings. I've had them over my home. They've met our family, and I think we're all healing together. And that's the community I'd love for all of you to be able to experience at your university. So let me share with you what we built here at FSU. We tried this crazy experiment. What we were missing was student engagement. I wanted to flip the script. I was in a fraternity here at Florida State Sigma Chi, and we had been kicked off the campus for drugs and alcohol. So I wanted to flip the script because the administration here, probably like all the others, were, well, those are our problem children. We need to do something about them. Well, we all have to do social work, service work. So what if we can flip the script and get the Greek life to embrace this? And I could tell you, those people over there did an amazing job in taking our biggest population group and getting them to embrace what we're doing here at Florida State. We began with a handful of students, and last year we grew to almost 40 students that are sticking in recovery. Had some of our fraternity brothers at a program activity that Chelsea had. We had over 1,100 unique student engagements. And I'm going to share with you a little teaser on Safety Net, which is a 15-minute mini documentary that we made for Florida State with Christina Canfield from the Association of Recovery for Higher Education. And it's just a good feel that every university is going to have a chance to look at to help them on their journey to hopefully building this at their campus. I lost my daughter, Christine, to the most vicious monster, the disease of addiction. It always bothered me Christine couldn't go to college. I didn't feel it was safe for her to go to school because there were no college recovery programs back then. When Christine died of a fentanyl overdose, I felt I had to do something. Christine was passionate about recovery, and in her journals, she said she wanted to be remembered for helping others fight this monster.
with substance use disorder.
The Division of Student Affairs, we're about success and learning. You can't learn and you can't be successful if you're not safe, healthy, and well. And so that really is at the core of everything we do.
The Lead Recovery Program is to be a safety net for a student in college, to catch them before they hit bottom. In the society, we keep acting like these students should just be able to find it on their own. We don't give them tools.
It's untenable for a student to have to choose between their education and their recovery. It doesn't have to be that way, and collegiate recovery programs make it so it's not that way. These programs reach all of the students who slip into substance use before it becomes a problem.
We have these dedicated alumni advocate and invest in a collegiate recovery program on their campus. They can change the institution of their alma mater.
You know what's crazy? More than 95% of all colleges do not have a recovery program. I don't think there's anything more important today than giving back to your school and potentially saving a life.
Thank you. A lot of the reason why is there. I was healing with them, but it was top down. I got to meet our provost, who was then the College of Social Work dean. So we had tremendous support at the top. Everybody had a why, all the way down to the student and graduate level. And it was an amazing collaboration of just not money, but of people, of love and compassion and care. And what I love is I think we built a solid foundation to keep this growing and share this with the rest of the country. I'd love to see this thriving on every campus. My daughter would be so proud. That was one of many pictures I've taken with her here. That was her, go back a second. That was her and I here when she had given her application to come to FSU, and I didn't know it was already OUD. Silent killer. Christine's battle. Ooh. This is the business side of me. What is the ROI? If you're an administrator who's looking at a budget, what's the ROI? I mean, what's the benefit? Saving lives? But what's really the ROI? This tremendous ROIs. One, the students in recovery have a higher graduation rate. Two, which blew me away, but it really doesn't, they end up graduating with almost a full point higher in GPA. And three, they become better alumni and they serve and they will thrive. And how can you not get behind that? We should all be rooting for our campuses to help us build that. So if you have any naysayers, this is all backed by research. So Christine's battle with disease still left me with so many questions. There had to be a deeper reason for her substance abuse. That led me to my second initiative. We need to catch this disease as early as possible. I asked myself, what can we do to prevent addiction? I learned a lot about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and it changed my thinking about this disease. I would imagine everybody here knows what ACEs are, but they're traumatic experiences that happen in childhood that really affect long-lasting the ability for us to be able to have a healthy and any kind of thriving lifestyle. So what are we really talking about? ACEs. We're talking about abuse. We're talking about emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and the biggest trauma that hits our children, divorce. According to CDC, ACEs are linked to chronic health problems, mental health illness, and SUD. Over 2/3 of our children in the U.S. are affected by ACEs, and 1 of 8 have 4 or more ACEs. It's tough to speak about ACEs because Christine had 4 when she was in middle school. And when she passed, she had 8. As you can see, the more ACEs a person has, the more apt they are to, unfortunately, be apt to have SUD. For those suffering with OUD, they usually have 4 or more, which is why we need to prevent this in primary schools. We need to catch this early in elementary schools. We need to better educate parents and teachers on what to do to curb this before our children medicate with drugs and alcohol. This is much needed collaboration in primary schools so we can curb this before our children medicate to relieve themselves from the pain. I don't need to tell this group this, but it affects Hispanic. It affects blacks and Hispanics at a much greater rate. It also affects those in rural areas and marginalized communities at a much bigger rate. But Christine's situation isn't unique. 23 million people are suffering from SUD. So we move on to our third initiative. This is tiring me. At the community level, I'm not going federal. At the community level, we want to do a better job at reforming addiction treatment in a way that's practical. You know, the spends I see today are, the JEC report said $1.5 trillion. I've seen many that are between 750 million and $1.2 billion. So let's just say the economic burden today of this disease is over $1 trillion. So a reason why we should do something about it at a federal and a state level. What kills me is only 1 in 10 people get treatment for this disease. I know everybody in this room knows why, but I'm going to still talk about them. I'm going to add a 4th to a parent. Confusion. What do I do? MAT, 12 steps, motivate. Stigma. As I said before, internally, externally, sometimes the family, MAT versus 12-step, and just society in general. I saw a report about how many people would love to have an addict as a friend. Anybody care to guess what the percentage was? Access, especially in rural areas. So stigma, cost, access, and confusion. That's what a parent's faced with. If it's a child or an adolescent. If it's an adult, I hope everybody gets an expert and you get to look at all the options and you get educated on all the options, and it's still complex and it's a personal choice. In contrast to every other chronic disease, being in the insurance industry, this really hurts. Insurance only takes care of about 10%. So we really need funding federally. We need more Medicaid expansion. We need more of the states to fill the gap. Yeah, there's a Parity Act, but we don't really do a good job in enforcing it. So what do we do? I don't think you're surprised by this one. We need to do a better job on a war on demand, not just supply. These are things we all know. We need to improve awareness and prevention. I know we know this, but the families that are in need, especially in rural areas and marginalized communities, they're struggling. They may know it, but they just don't know how to get out. We need to better educate docs, especially in rural areas when they're the primary mode of care. 1 in 4 docs still are trained well in residency and medical school. We need to do a better job with that, and we need to do it fast. There's no reason why we don't need a harm reduction. I think we're over that one. I think we all know we need to embrace this model. I grew close to a lot of the people in this film, and I healed, but this gentleman over here, Dr. Sheehan, is a top NIDA and SAMHSA researcher and has become a great friend. He's an addiction psychiatrist. So we got really close to this. For those who didn't see the movie or the film, when I used to look at a homeless person from where I was at, a poor Cuban kid that came here and worked hard and had success, I would say, why don't you get a job? I don't think I ever saw a face. I see faces now. We need to treat these people with care and compassion. We need to help them. And if they want help, we need to treat them with dignity and respect. We need MAT everywhere with major therapy. I can't believe people still fight me on that. It doesn't mean it's the only journey, but it's a journey that needs to be considered. Seriously. Drug courts and diversion needs to continue. You're not going to see a fight from me. You've already won me over on that one. It just doesn't work to criminalize people for nonviolent offenses. This one I learned from Dr. Lloyd Cetera from Columbia University. I'd call it Tuesdays with Maury. I can't believe he'd take my call all the time. And I'd read about SPURT, and he's been on the front end of MAT and harm reduction forever. He's retired now, but he was the public health officer at New York State, with the whole state, the MAT for OUD, written about 7 bestsellers, and I would just talk to him about common sense approach. And he goes, Mike, if we can get doctors trained, especially in rural areas, we can really execute on SPURT. We can screen everybody, we can do brief intervention when needed, and we can refer them to treatment when it's necessary. We need to incentivize docs to do this. I already talked about stigmatization. The stigma that my daughter received when she was trying to go the MAT route was a killer. I'm not blaming it just on that, but it was a killer. What she needed more than anything was community and connection. And she got 1 chip. The next day, she'd get 1 chip. And she goes, Dad, I can't do this anymore. And we didn't know it, but she stopped taking her Suboxone. And then she got a 3rd chip, and she was cheating. A 4th chip, and she was cheating. It didn't take long before I realized that she was cheating. We got to do better. We got to really do better. I think a lot of people are knowing about this in the 12-step community. I love the support groups in 12-step. AAs, I love that. But they have to learn that if somebody chooses to go down that path, that's their journey, respect it. We're all allowed to have different ideologies and thoughts on what we think is best for us. I'm not going to bore you with social media. I've already kind of shared about what I learned live. We need to do a better job at getting parents to do their part, and government and us as a society to do our part with social media. I don't want to go the controversial route, but I'm a lot about research, and this is a controversial area, but psychiatrist is the only medical profession that doesn't look at the organ they treat. Kills me to think about that. I had some arguments over the last 2 or 3 years with this one. SPECT imaging is very interesting. They use PET imaging, PET scans at NIDA. Joe, we know about Nora Goff and PET imaging. What SPECT imaging does, it introduces radiation and it gives you a better look, a higher resolution look. Dr. Daniel Ammon claims he's got 700 million views. I mean, he's got 700 million views, but he's got a couple 100 million specs, and they could diagnose better and thus treat better. I think it's something we need to look at. We're kind of anxiously waiting to look at this thing with authorities and see if it's something that helps us in diagnosis and treatment of ADHD, of anxiety, of depression, of trauma, and of SUD. I don't know if you guys have heard of Kratom. Who's heard of Kratom? Good, I'm not alone. When my daughter ran out of her last sober living home, I was at lunch with her before she ran, And she goes, Dad, I need to get some kratom. It helps me with withdrawals. I'm like, why would that be legal? Went to a convenience store, got it for her, drove her back at the sober living home, and she takes off. I'm at home Googling kratom, and I get the call as I'm looking at what kratom is. It's legal in the U.S. It's banned in 7 or 8 states. It's legal here in Florida. It's illegal in Sarasota. It has no medical benefits. The FDA has a clear warning, and I think we really need to get to the bottom of kratom. There's more places that sell kratom in Tampa Bay that sell coffee. Our final initiative. We have 2 amazing stories of redemption. We have our own, Jane Dwyer Lee. She's not here now. She's out for personal reasons, but it's an amazing story of an adjunct professor here at the College of Social Work, who I have loved getting to know. We've probably shot her for 20 hours. I don't want to give the story up, but it's a tremendous, inspiring story of redemption. And she got sober, obviously going the 12-step route. And then we have another story. My cousin is one of the bigger agents for UFC fighters. And I've retired myself a couple times because of my daughter's situation, and sponsored a lot of his fighters. And Jared's story is amazing. He was sexually abused. He's one of the top fighters in the world in the lightweight division. And he has given back to sexually abused children and has a foundation for drug-free kids. And he went down the MAT route. As you can see, my daughter's legacy has become my purpose. And I'm going to end with, you guys are not alone. I'm in this fight with you. We have a platform that's going to use media to make a difference. So I'm all ears on how we can help. Thank you for having me and share my story. Thank you.
We're going to have some time now for questions and answers. Hopefully answers, questions, but answers. And we have some more time with
I'm not a doctor.
Right, but
or a psychiatrist.
we do have lots of questions. I know that people are interested, so I'm just going to try not to fall off the stage here and walk around to people that may have some questions for you. So I think you unfortunately have to stay at the mic.
I like to move around.
I
and
know.
This was tough.
The mean mom is making Mike stay on the stage so
Yeah.
we can record him. I think we have Margarita's first. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Margarita. I'm a current student here at FSU. First, I want to say thank you so much for all of the work that you've been doing. It's really amazing and super fascinating. I have 2 questions. One of them is, they're both about the college recovery program, the LIFT program, but you said that you wanted to flip the script in Greek life, which I found super interesting. So I was wondering if you could speak on how you navigated that, just given like the culture around colleges, universities, Greek life, the party culture.
I'm going to give that kudos and that answer to, I'm going to give that question to Chelsea. I think we should give it to someone who's on the ground, or Liam. These are the people that run our LIFT program, and my crazy idea was met with a little bit of resistance. You'll never do that. You're crazy. It'll never work. So I'll let Chelsea run with this.
Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea Shore. I'm the graduate coordinator for the Collegiate Recovery Program at Florida State. I'm a person in long-term natural recovery from substance misuse. I am a doctoral candidate in higher education leadership and policy studies. So Greek life is actually very, very open to this idea of working with collegiate recovery. They don't know how to have conversations. They know it's a problem, but they don't necessarily have the toolkit. They don't want to sit at a computer and work through an AOD prevention module. They kind of just keep clicking next. They want real world application. So Mike kind of gave us the in with his fraternity to do a focus group with our classroom-based recovery ally training. And they told us what they liked, what they didn't like, how we can make some real world scenarios to do role plays. And then they said, This is great, but we don't want to sit in a classroom for 2 hours. Can we make this physical? I entered recovery through the competitive sport of bodybuilding, and I had been working with a nationwide nonprofit called the Phoenix, which offers free sports and activities to anybody with 48 hours of abstinence. And so we partnered up with them, with my undergraduate assistant, Mia, for 1 year, and we worked on 3 different field day activities with our campus recreation program through the Challenge Course Education program. And then we connected all of the debrief conversations back to the process of addiction and social support in recovery. We did a pre, post, and follow-up survey measure, which we're currently analyzing the quantitative data for, but we did measure substance using behaviors, frequency of use, attitudes towards people who use, stigma towards people in recovery, and then group cohesion. So was substance misuse something that was encouraged by their leadership, or was it discouraged by their leadership? Our preliminary analysis indicate that it was effective in the pre and post, but not in the 30-day follow-up. I'm not that great at stats, though, so we have to fix that. And then our qualitative data does say that they found it very beneficial. They would like to repeat the activity, and it did spark conversations. So my hypothesis with the 30-day follow-up is that we're not necessarily asking the right questions, that there is some type of behavior and attitude change, but we're not measuring it correctly with quantitative scales.
Thank you, Chelsea. And I know we had a question across the room. I'm coming over there. We should have had more mics, but it's good for me. I'll get more steps in, right?
Need an alumni to give a donation to the school for more mics.
Hello, my name's Alethea Bernard, and I'm from Kentucky State University. So first of all, thank you for sharing your story on several levels. I can relate vicariously through my parents losing my brother some time ago. But along those lines I have 3 questions, and just short version, and then I would like to communicate with you a little bit later. So the first is, when you were talking about with rural providers. So I'm a PI on something else that we're working with rural mental health during disasters. So when we're talking about rural providers, and we're talking about educating the providers that are there, the doctors and such, how do we address that a lot of the services just aren't there? So the services, the treatment centers, the providers just aren't there. So, and I'm also, from the business perspective, the policy perspective, working with the legislators. So that's the first part. Second is, when you're working with campus and with students, there are a lot that do not identify as having problems or being in recovery. And as providers, clinicians, adults even, we can look sometimes like, look, you've been drinking like 3-4 hours every day, but that's kind of the culture sometimes. And then the last one is, how do you work with the middle schools? Have you started doing that? What ideas do you have? And so these kind of relate, but because as you mentioned with ACEs, and then especially when you're working with disparaged communities and such, there are kids who are, especially with middle school and elementary, there are kids who have 8, 9 already. So how do we go about that? And so short version, I know these are kind of long.
And those are great questions. I could spend an hour with you. But, I can answer some. Obviously, there's an interest for us to work together. So one, we haven't started the prevention initiative yet. That's a huge undertaking. There's a lot of overlap in what we're talking about here, right? The prevention is to hit it in primary schools. So we haven't even started that. There's a great need. I think we all can agree that somebody doesn't wake up and just put a needle in their arm, and it's a personal choice. We damage our children as a society in our own homes through peers. So there's a great need. I think there's probably better people in this room to answer some of your questions. I would like to dig more deep. I think the second question regarding trauma and ACEs, I'm really looking forward to tackle that one in the primary schools, but again, we're not there with that one. On the reform, I think there's overlap, and on the policy side, I think there's nothing better to advocate for policy change than parents who've lost children or people that have the network. I kind of realize why I'm in this role now, because I've got the ability to network, And I know people, and we just have to find those that are in the same place we are that will help us make good changes. But those are wonderful questions, but ones I can't answer yet. We're not there. We literally went through the CRP build here was something that we've been working on for 18 months and ready to share with other universities, and we still have a lot of work here at FSU. And 1 second at a time was cathartic, healing, but at the same time the most emotionally exhausting journey after losing my daughter and really becoming vulnerable. So why don't we spend some time? I think there's probably, if anybody wants to help answer those questions, I will gladly. I'm looking at Dr. Barbara. I loved your book, Opiate Fix. I read it twice. I have highlights in it. I think you do a great job at answering some of these, but I think those are great questions that let's talk about them. But there's an overlap between reforming and prevention. So reform, treatment, and prevention that we can talk about. Wonderful questions, but way beyond my pay grade right now.
And I do think that some of the sessions that are in the symposium for the next 2 days will get to some of those issues. As Mike indicated, Dr. Barbara Andraku-Christou has really her presentation will address the physician access issue. We do have a session on children prevention, mostly directed towards teens, but our ROTA Center is looking at the younger primary age group as well. And we do plan next year to have a virtual conference like this, and one of the topics we will be focusing on is campus recovery programs. So we have more information coming, but please know that we are also a resource to some of these issues and have thought through some of these issues and do have information available. So any more questions for Mike?
Hi, I just first wanted to say thank you for sharing your story. I can probably speak for all of us. A lot of that was really hard to hear, so thank you for what you're doing. I think that it's amazing work that you're doing because this is such a big problem. So anyway, my name is Jen, and I'm with the Georgia Department of Public Health. So I have two questions. One about the collegiate recovery program. How do you even go about doing that? Because whenever you were talking about that, I'm thinking of two colleges in the district that I cover back at home, which also happen to be my two largest counties, and we see the most overdose activity coming from those two counties. I do a lot of outreach work on the campus, or one of the campuses, but how do you even go about presenting that idea to colleges and getting people involved with that? That would be my first question.
I think that's a great question. I think Chelsea could maybe answer it, but Christina Canfield, who you saw in that presentation, is the executive director of ARHE, and they're in the National Collegiate Program backdrop where you go for resources, and Chelsea happens to be on their board of directors.
Hi, so you would actually talk to me. I sit on the board of directors for the Association of Recovery in Higher Education, and part of what I do as the graduate student representative is consult with other colleges on how we did it. We were fortunate at Florida State to really have a top-down, bottom-up approach happening at the exact same time. So the support from Angela and the Division of Student Affairs really got it off the ground and got me in place, and I was already connected with students in recovery. So yeah, we can definitely talk after. We have a whole portfolio that we can share with you.
And she has a second question.
Yes, it won't be
Oh, no,
long,
no.
I promise. So, of course, we've talked a little bit about starting prevention initiatives like in primary school, and I know you had mentioned the session, I think, tomorrow. So I have come into, I guess, we'll just say difficulty with this, right? Because being a state government employee, and then obviously when you're talking about K through 12 kind of thing, nobody wants to hear about it. Same with sex ed, but it's listen, guys, your kids are doing this stuff. I don't care if you think they're perfect angels or not. They're gonna do things. And so I actually haven't even had the opportunity to do any prevention work with any of K through 12 schools in my district. Now, luckily in May, I will be able to do that. One of the superintendents reached out to me, but so I'll have a big presentation for like the students and the parents and stuff. But how do you even, I guess, go about conquering that? Just because, like I said, there's such a big, people are just like, oh no, we can't talk about drugs to the kids, but it's like, bro, your kids are probably potentially doing drugs.
I think
You
what
know
we're
what I
probably
mean?
going to, yeah, I think it's a huge undertaking. I think it'd be problematic for me to try to do it in public schools right now. I think we got to take a private school. My daughter's school, her private school, 3 people in her class have passed from heroin and fentanyl overdose. So I have an audience. You need a champion, but you need a champion on that side. They have a problem. There's a champion there. And as Chelsea said, we've done a great job here at fighting this problem top up and up down. So at my daughter's private school, it's an IB program, and it goes from K to 12. We can model that like we did here, and we would involve a lot of people outside FSU, like we did with ARHE. But I think we have to build a pilot and sit down and really go through all. It would be a mess to do it. Not that we can't do it. We have to do it on a small scale that we can control, and then drive data and see where we're at. But the tools are all out there. You get a NIDA, SAMHSA, there's tremendous toolkits at every age. There's 5 or 6 wonderful toolkits for elementary school teachers and parents. I just don't know if people know that. So we're starting to drop all those on our website. As people gain eyes on what we're doing, I want them to go there, and then I'm pushing them. I want to push them to NIDA, to SAMHSA, to CDC, where the data is. I don't, it's great for them to sit on my site, but I want to push them. There's so many toolkits. So the first thing is helping them know where the toolkits are. And it's one-off. I mean, we need change. We need to advocate for change. We just need to do a better job at training, not the teachers, but the parents. And someone lies the problem, right? But if we've got a desire to do this locally, and we will, because we have a big problem, and we're willing to put a camera on this and watch this thing grow, like we did the college recovery. So it'll be probably a mini doc, maybe more, because this is probably the biggest issue we had with my daughter. On the outside, beautiful, nothing wrong. On the inside, havoc. I can't imagine what that would be like on the in rural areas. I imagine that is extremely more horrific. So yes, I think, do you understand what we're trying to do? We're trying to control it, do something small, and be able to show it works. But there's a lot of good toolkits out there.
So we have time for one more question.
Not necessarily a question. Hello, everyone. Dr. Jones from Tuskegee University Department of Social Work. And of course, we're in a rural area, and I grew up living in a rural area. Mike, you're right. We're looking at and hoping to get grant funding at the request of the local principal. We started outreach with our social work interns, and the community kept coming to us because substance abuse is very high and rampant in the rural area, not only on the campus, but with middle school students, to the point they're doing drugs on the bus. And so what we have developed and what we identified, who are your stakeholders? Who do we need to touch to make change? We listened to the principal, kind of did a needs assessment, and we found that parents have to be educated and buy in. But it's more than just giving a toolkit. We got our students and our faculty and boots on the ground, grassroots efforts, to build rapport and trust and say, let's talk about the reality in this culture of almost the hippie era coming back. And what can we do about it in the message about caring, health and wellness, and stopping death? I too lost a relative to fentanyl who had a mental health issue who was trying to mask it. So to answer your question or some ideas, on campus, we started Active Minds. Have any of you heard of Active Minds? It's a mental health substance abuse outreach, and it's peer-led but supported by faculty advisors who have expertise in that area. Why did we do that? Because it's more buy-in coming from your peers, and peers may be more trusted, so we train them, especially the social work students, to do the outreach. Social work students going into those schools look a little bit younger. They know their language. I don't know what being lit means. What is being lit? And so my students knew what being lit was. But what we find in rural areas, until the SAMHSA reps is in, and we need your help because we need more grant funding in those areas to make a difference, and we're often overlooked or perhaps we don't put together a good proposal. So I would like to see more of that come out so that big urban areas or schools don't always get the awards, and we don't, but we have, someone said there's access deserts. Mental Health America has been talking to me. If you have no transportation, how can you get to the center? If you have no broadband, how can you do telehealth? So then what? And then if your local mental health agency is the little red place on campus that everybody knows of that has stigma, or is somewhere in the community where everybody knows you're going to get help, then what? So we thought about in-house school counseling, which the state has. So those were some of the resources. I'll talk to you on an individual basis if you like to. Thank you.
Because I want to make sure that we're mindful of our schedule and give Mike a couple minutes just to wrap up and final words for us. And we hope that Mike will be here for the next 2 days off and on, attending some of your sessions and attending our reception.
I want to say, what we're doing is collaborative, and these issues from a different perspective. Some of you have seen it from my perspective, and I indulge you to reach out to me. We're probably 6 months out, back to the 3 questions on prevention and reform. So we're at least 6 months out. We need a rest. We're talking to distributors about getting 1 second at a time out there. There's a lot of interest. So we want to do that. We want to get that in the hands of everybody. For those who've seen it, it connects with everybody. It talks about the core humanity. It talks about our children. It talks about a good foundation. So that's really what we're going ahead and focusing on, as well as helping FSU build a better foundation with our CRP here and being able to spread that with every university. We're still a good 6 months from really digging into 2 big endeavors in prevention in primary schools and reform. But thank you so much for having me. But again, please reach out, and I will be sticking around for a day and a half, or a full day.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you, Mike.